We haven't met for what now? 30 years? 40 years?
I don't know.
He did a wonderful article on my work when I was in Ashford in England. And I've been following your writings. I have one which I like very much, where you talk of copies and imitation and
Pastiche.
pastiche. Yeah, I think I should tell them the difference, because you explain it beautifully.
Imitation is really, I would say, the most viable and the most interesting tool we can have, theoretical tool we have to really approach our heritage and I work with it. And I think it's completely counterproductive to start a discussion on historical or architectural heritage by forbidding people to forbid. Because it's already kind of threatens you. It just takes you, it just puts you in a defensive position. And I think that's not the way to. There should be like a tolerance, there should be like a kind of flexibility. And mostly when we copy, and when we copy literally, it's because we don't know what to do else. And it's the way we're learning, so children learn like that. When you know, when you have learned, then you kind of slowly evolve into a kind of more freer kind of way of handling. You kind of pass the heritage. And it's when you, and I think when you kind of really accomplish it, mostly it's when you get either very old or when it's too late. That's when you kind of really get the freedom, of composing and creating, and you kind of become part of nature.
You reminded me of a story. I used to love seeing the Marx Brothers. They were comedians. And I used to laugh as a young boy, teenager. And at one time, Harpo, who used to play the piano, he's playing, and Groucho, with the cigar and his big mustache and eyeglasses, comes to him and says, "Harpo, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm composing." And he said, "But that's Chopin." He said, "Yes, I'm composing Chopin."
Yeah.
So, talking of copies, but people don't understand it in our education, in our schools, for two reasons. One reason, they forgot that when you say he did the masterpiece, that means he copied the thing properly. So he did it so well that it is the masterpiece. I remember when I was doing the Agami house in Alexandria, in Agami, and people would come and look at the building and say, "Hassan Fathi?" I said, "Yes."
Yeah.
Everybody go, "Hassan Fathi, yes." So my client was furious. He said, "Why do you keep saying Hassan Fathi? Why don't you say it's your work so you can get other jobs?" "Why are you saying every time somebody asks you, is this Hassan Fathi's work, you say yes?" And I told him, I'm very happy to say that, because if they confuse me for the master, that means I made the masterpiece. That's the word, masterpiece. So one day we were invited to the Canadian embassy, and I had a friend of mine, Australian friend, who said, "The ambassador is inviting you. We're having dinner at the Canadian embassy." And when I went with Hassan Fathi to the Canadian embassy, all the diplomatic had their houses in Agami, where I had built the house. So they came and they said, "Congratulations, Hassan Bey, for the beautiful house you've done in Agami." Everybody. And of course, he didn't know why they were saying this, because I was saying this is his work. But Hassan Fathi always complained that people steal his drawings. So I told Hassan Bey, he always complained that the students steal your drawings. You go and tell the people that you designed the house of Hassan Fathi. Why don't you tell them? And he laughed and he was very witty. He said in Arabic, "Ma ya Wahed," because my name is Abdel Wahed. So he called me Wahed. Wahed is one. But he says, "Ma ya Wahed, ana wanta Wahed." Me and you are one. And it was that beautiful relationship that we had at the end. But it was about copying that is very important what you said in your paper, because people come from university and they get annoyed, they want to be original. When they say original, it means different, but original is going back to the origin. And when they say creative, it means distortion. Like the buildings you have here that are one is twisted that way, the other is twisted the other way, the other looks like an egg, the other looks like a corn of a buffalo or a crescent. So creative means being different, unfortunately. So you have all this ego playing around. So basically the architecture today that is being taught at university is how to have an ego, how to be different, and how to be ignorant. Because if you do not know about cost of a building, if you don't know about the mechanics of a building, and so on, it's very difficult for you. It's very easy for you to make any form. But if you know how to build, you cannot do these stupid forms. The thing is that they don't understand the knowledge of tradition. And they don't want you to copy, but on the contrary, the mission of the university is to have the perpetuity of tradition, because the university is only recording a memory of knowledge. If you lose all the knowledge of mathematicians, of Archimedes, of everything, what will you start from zero again? You build up on what is there. And the other thing that the West has that is damaging to our part of the world is that they have this, what do you call it, the colonial mentality, that they are the civilized world and we are the savages. I remember a film I was seeing once of Malaysia, a man who was in Malaysia, an Englishman, and he fell in love with a Malaysian girl, and he wanted to marry her. And they told me, you can't marry a savage. Imagine, this is about 50 years ago, maybe, that 100 years ago, anybody not from the European community was a savage. So this inferiority complex is inherited through generations, unfortunately. And it's because of this inheritance that we have all those stupid buildings here done by foreigners. When the Prince of Wales, King Charles, wanted me to do a building in London, they told him, why have an Arab do a building here in London? What does he know about English architecture? And I've been living in England. So the prince got very annoyed and he apologized for them. And I said, I'm happy that we don't have this attitude. Because if we had this attitude, none of them would have done any building in the Arab world. Because they've been doing buildings in Saudi Arabia and and cities without even living one day in the desert. But I'm living in England all my years. Why have this? And they refused to give me any work. At the end, he was so exhausted, the Prince of Wales, that when they asked him to be the patron for the Center of Islamic Studies in Oxford, he put a condition that El-Wakil does the design.
Like going back to the university, I'm teaching at the University of Rotterdam, which I think is one of the really outstanding universities that the students really learn how to build, and they kind of get a really good sense of proportion, of composition. It's true that it's only, because when we talk about classicism, because we teach in classical architecture, but many people, I think even still now, many of my classical colleagues are convinced that the only kind of respectable classicism is the Greco-Roman ones. But there's also a growing number of people who kind of say every culture has its classical, and classical is the best.
Thank you for saying this.
Yeah, no,
Thank you. Because the first meeting we had with the Prince of Wales, I was asked to come into it, and they were all telling him to go back to tradition, to do Greco-Roman architecture, Renaissance.
Yeah.
So I told him, Your Highness, this is not the way to go back to tradition. He said, what? I said, you are going to be the future head of the Church of England. The only way to go back to tradition is to go back to a Christian architecture. So Brian Hansen screamed, because there was the only Muslim there telling him to go to a Christian architecture. And the prince said, why? I told him, because this is a Greco-Roman pagan architecture. You can't have it as your heritage and your tradition. If you're going to be the future head of the Church of England, you have to do a Christian architecture. And they got shocked that came from a Muslim to tell him this. Leon Kriel was furious. Said, the prince is telling me, you said this in the meeting. Why? I told him, because it's true. Yeah. People don't like his work because it is based on Greco-Roman. He used to tell me, why people love your work and tradition, they always attack me. I told him, because you're not doing the tradition of your culture. Imagine me doing pharaonic temples instead of mosques. You go and pray in a pharaonic temple. This was asked to me in America. There was a very famous architect from Latin America who came. We had 3 architects, and he was there, and he had a very tall building with a hole in it. And he showed a picture of the stone with a hole in it, Mayan. And he related this to that, which is another thing of the things you wrote about, which is making forms like this building that is a big crescent and tells you it's an Islamic form or something. So he's linking that to Mayan tradition. So one person, I think it was South Korea, asked why El-Wakil is not from Egypt, not doing pharaonic architecture. Why are you only doing Islamic architecture? And what can you answer this in front of an auditorium with 200 people? What can you explain? And I said, I can't do that. Can't do a pharaonic. And he said, why? I told him, because the pharaohs walked sideways, walked like an Egyptian. I can't do we can't do like the Egyptians because the faith there changed. So basically, the loss in architecture today is because of the loss of the sacred and the spiritual aspect of architecture. We don't understand that architecture creates space. It is our connection with the external world. We have an internal world and an external world. And that is very important. There is this child psychologist, Jean Piaget, who has a book on the concept of space for the child and how the mind develops through his space and how he deals with his environment. I remember in Saudi Arabia, very early in the 70s, when they started having pickups from Japan and so on, they didn't have cars before. And they had this pickup, and they get all those women sitting in like the sheep in the back of, and the driver cabin is taking them for the pilgrimage or for prayer at Mecca from Jeddah. And you'd find the pickup overturned and all those women lying on the road, and nobody wants to touch them because they're women. And they are lying there on the road. And every time you had those cars overturned, why? Because they didn't learn the mechanics of centrifugal force. Because as a child, he never rode a bicycle, or they didn't have these things. So they didn't know at speed you have a centrifugal force, your toys can overturn. They didn't have these. So children learn from their environment. And if you are building an environment that is completely schizophrenic, what do you expect? I always say that the violence that is in the Arab world today, in the cities, and in Europe also, and in England, the crimes, the drugs, everything, is not a lack of only faith and religion, anything, it is of the environment. Because people have always been oppressed, has always been poor, have always been, but when they lived in nice environments, healthy, natural environments, they weren't violent. The violence comes from our cities. They are very violent. You have cities today, there's new projects that have been done here where people can't walk in the street, only motorways.
That's also, I mean, there are places which have to be demolished. There was one picture which was, I think you showed it. It's like, a brick, what is it called, the brick wall, where they have all these slabs built by the same Japanese architect who built the Twin Towers. And it has to be demolished because it had become completely crime-ridden, ungovernable.
Yeah.
The only solution was to take it away. The same happens with French suburbs, where they build these suburbs to get all the migrants.
They are horrible. Yeah.
Pack them in the environments which are hostile environments. Yeah. And the hostility, it's the outdoor space, it's the confusion of public and private. It's also inside, then you have like hallways where you have so many people that you don't know your neighbor. And today we had this lecture where,
they pee in the elevators, and they have drugs, and they have raping, and they're all demolished, those buildings now in England.
Yeah, so the difference there is that this place has become so ungovernable that even the police doesn't go there.
Yeah.
And there's also a place in Italy, there's one building in Italy which became it got award and it has been published in all the architectural magazine. It's a building which is 1 kilometer long. Social housing.
Who did it?
I don't know the name of it. Something like a Garigotti type of building. So it's just one long slab, 1 kilometer. At the outskirts of Rome, this building now nobody knows who lives there, because there are a lot of people live there who have no, I mean, there are foreigners, people who don't pay rent, nobody pays rent. The police doesn't go there, there's crime, there's dance there and everything. But also what this building did, because it's the building kept the breeze. So it has changed the climate in Rome, because it has built such a wall in between the landscape and Rome that the climate has completely changed. I want you to go back to the university, because I'm working in university, and the new university. So I think there are a lot of things which change, since you taught in Miami, and also like working with students, and also working here. I think, for example, the receptivity, so the willingness, the eagerness of the young generation to learn about traditions is much greater than it was before. Depending, apparently there are some places where people, when you talk about tradition, there's a no, because people think that tradition is looking backward.
I'll interrupt you here, because it's not a matter of tradition. You have to go to the root. You know why the devil's lance has 3 prongs? 3 prongs. Ignorance, greed, and egoism. That are the 3. These are being taught at university today. The problem with our universities today is that they do not have the sanctity and the spiritual aspect that established the word university. They have become schools to learn how to make money and find a job. People do not learn anything today. You want a university to produce people, you have to change. One thing that you should change is the white collar and the blue collar that Europe created. The architect should be a gentleman, white collar, and the craftsman, blue collar. He's not the guy to go to university. The elite, the artist, the man of taste is the one that should go to university. But that's not true in tradition. The first thing university should change and have in their curriculum the sacred, the spiritual, and to know more about the nature of man, and how without this spiritual aspect, the prongs of the devil will get him very easily. This is always, you want to solve the problem, go to the root. This is it. So when they come and say change curriculum, I tell you the white and the blue collar, what happens. When I told them, okay, let's build, the students couldn't. This is wrong. I went, the first time I was building with my mason, I got up and I told him, teach me how to build a dome. And he said, why? They don't give you their secrets. He said, why? I said, because when you'll die, what shall I do? I'll stop building the way I want? Because a lot of architects don't do it because they don't know how they're making concrete. So he said, fine. I got up, ready to build a dome with him, and then he said, you take off your architect's hat. Yeah, nice cowboy hat. I have one also, but Fahd told me don't wear it today because his hat is nicer than yours, so I put my Russian hat.
Once one student told me I had an ugly hat.
No, it's a fantastic hat. It reminds me of Robert Redford.
It's Indiana Jones.
Yeah. Anyhow, I got up and he told me, take off your architect's hat here. I said, what does it mean? He said, you do a mistake with the hammer and break your knuckles. I told him, what kind of teacher are you? Is this the only way you teach? I see the mechanic hitting the boy with the bar. You want to hit me with the hammer? Why? He said, you want to notice? Why? You as an architect, when you do a mistake, you have an eraser. Just erase it like this and draw the line again. Here, our mistake, you and me are dead under the dome. That's why. So, you know, you don't have a mistake when you're walking on a trapezium and you have no net. You have to know how to do it. At university, you do whatever you want. Projects are all mistaken. You have no idea of structures. You have no idea of geometry. What do you want? What do you want him to produce when he goes out of university? He learns everything working in an office. He learns nothing at university.
So do you think that, because, you know, what I found out at university, because I've been teaching for the last 30 years.
Well, you are a patient man. I can't.
Yeah. But I think it's working, because I'm kind of getting, you know, I kind of see the impact it has on students. And I'm patient. Yeah, you have to be patient. But I see the university, I'm not patient with the university, so I'm kind of also very patient, because what I see at university now, even the idea of teaching is no longer what the university is really about, because now there's this kind of obsession, this research. And I ask people, what research? Because I am at the university to teach, and my really principal interest is to work with students. And they say, and I say, can I do things with my students, and will that be considered research? That's not considered as research. Research is what you do as a professor, and I say, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to research upon, and what is the purpose of research? And you say, you're doing papers.
To get doctor's degree.
Yeah, eventually. But then you do papers, and I say, what is happening with the papers? The papers search for other research. And then what this other research is, again, doing papers and symposiums. And then I'm looking into the academic world, and I see all the retractions. There are hundreds of retractions. So there are people, they are kind of creating past data, because in order to get nominated, to get professorships, to get the PhD, they have to do research, peer-reviewed. Then peer-reviewed, you ask your colleague, can you peer-review me? I peer-review you. And at some point, what kind of gets a little bit the side interest is teaching with the student. And then also, you were mentioning, the kind of hands-on experience, really learn from practice. It's where
you reminded me now of something. I got the first fund for the Prince of Wales School of Architecture. And I got it through King Salman now, was Prince Salman. And we started the school. So they had this meeting, all the professors, Dimitri Porphyrius, Leon Krier, everybody was there. And then they were talking how they're going to make the program for the school. So everybody came with their old baggage. And I was there sitting, listening to them. I told them, you've been always talking about the program and this, and we teach them in summer workshop and in winter theory. And I said, the most important thing you didn't do. And he said, what? He said, you're thinking of the subjects. As educators, how can you teach the student the fastest way for the short period is at university? You don't know. The person who can tell you that is Seymour Papert. Seymour Papert came from South Africa, a Jew from South Africa, immigrated to America, was a professor at MIT of the beginning of artificial intelligence. He produced the logo language for computers, Lisp, that we use in AutoCAD to make programs with it, the first Lisp. And he used it to make the turtle graphics of Apple, to teach students how to work on computers. And I said, you get him and you ask him how to develop the program for the student to learn. They couldn't even accept it. The one who did art would say, we got them statues to draw from. Why from statues? This is Beaux-Arts from... So that's why the school failed. And that's why I didn't continue.
What I notice is that many students come to the university and they have never used a compass, because now you have softwares, so people, and I think the computers have had an incredibly damaging impact on the imitation. I've seen people also seen people, they have been able to resolve problems of, structural problems when they were using a computer. The same problem 1 year later, just freehand, they couldn't do it anymore. Because the memory, all the things they learned, they left it in the computer. So they don't have it in themselves because the computer just kind of stole it.
It's not only done this damage. You know the word of computers, NURBS.
Yes.
NURBS. NURBS. You know what it stands for? Non-uniform, rational, Boolean splines. These are very complex equations. And there is one equation of the catenary. This equation of the catenary, they confused it with that of the parabola until they discovered it 200 years ago when they were doing the suspension bridges in Victorian times. The equation of the parabola is different from the equation of the catenary. I asked structural engineers today, do you know the equation of a catenary to calculate it? They don't. So basically what happened with computers is you are allowed to do those incredible forms and the computer works it for you. But if you work with tradition, you learn how to draw. You learn how to draw, and that is why this white collar and blue collar is in education, don't separate it. You want the person to learn like the old days. They'd go to the master and work with him. You go to the master, you see him design, you see him build, you see the contractor, you see how it's being made. We didn't learn all this at university. I came out an ignoramus out of university. And I was the first of my class.
I remember one thing also, you told me about the dome structures. Very interesting. I've not forgotten about that. You said that the way the kind of structural work is not like the way conventionally engineers calculate that. There is like a really type of rotating kind of EPUB. It's not just like a simple, structured stress. It's a kind of very complex, You remember that? Or maybe I explained it.
No, you're talking about what, and I remember.
No, the dome structure, because...
The dome structure?
Yeah, because you were telling that many dome structures, they kind of crack or they fail because they kind of don't really understand how exactly...
Yes.
There is something... Was it some type of helicoidal kind?
Yeah, I remember now. Because when I did the King Saud Mosque dome, it was 20 meters. And Hassan Fatih told me, you're crazy, don't go beyond 6 meters. I said, it's my only chance. I will never have that chance again. So Bin Laden, the contractor, said, I will not do it without steel reinforcement. And I said, no, I will not have steel reinforcement. So he said, as a contractor, I have to check that your work is right. So he got the best structural engineer in Egypt. His father was top professor, genius. His father was. And he got him to review my work and work with me to make the calculations. So he was telling me, you have to put, I said, you're doing your calculations wrong. And he said, why? He said, because you work a force coming down like that, and you divide it into thrust and vertical load, and then you have the tension. So you have this force going down, you divide it into that, and you have the tension. And then you start putting ribs. And he said, well, I said, the force doesn't work like this. He said, how? I said, imagine you going up a hill in a car. Do you go up like that? You go zigzag. And that's how the forces go. I imagine how I work my dome is I imagine myself going up this dome like a hill. I will go like that, like that, like that, like that, like that, and then I'll go like this, like this. I told him it took a genius to discover this, Buckminster Fuller. And that's how he did. He started with 60 degrees, but there is one problem he discovered. The hexagon does not curve. There are 3 patterns that can only work on a flat surface: the triangle, the square, and the hexagon. Can you put any other regular polygon on a flat surface other than this? No. If you take a 5-sided, it will have to be on the go up vertically. And that's why the football, it has hexagons and 10 black pentagons in order to, how did the football come like this? Before it wasn't like, it was from Buckminster Fuller. So you see, the knowledge is interchangeable. It's not just, oh, that's how they do it. No, you have to know the origin of it.
So you said you came out of school without knowing that much. How did you build up you kind of all this expertise and wisdom and kind of architectural knowledge? Was it like through experience, reading, working with masters, and how much time did that take you? When did you really get to a level where you felt really comfortable and confident?
There was a Turkish architect in Saudi Arabia. Fatin, he died, poor guy, a few years ago. He was much older than me. And they got him there for the restoration of Medina and the old mosques. And he was an expert in Turkey on mosque restoration. So they did the muqarnas. You know the muqarnas? The stalactites? And I had my first mosque, and I wanted to do the stalactites. And I didn't know how. Very complex geometry. So they told me this guy that does restorations. I said, I want to put the muqarnas in my minute. I said, I'll do it for you. So I said, no, I want to see you do it. He said, don't waste your time. I'll do it for you. Go and get your work. So I said no, and then we went to the carpenter's shop to do the molds in wood and custom. And I'd go there, and you know what he said to me? You must be very difficult to work with. And I said, why? He said, you don't want to let go of everything. You want to learn everything. So whether I go up to the mason, tell him, teach me, and he say, I'll break your knuckles, I go to the thing to cut the wood, and there I have still scars of the saw, because you can lose your fingers in a wood in a carpentry shop. A lot of carpenters, I see one of their fingers missing. And I said, no, I want to learn. It's like this beautiful story of Zorba the Greek, of Kazantzakis. He saw his small finger missing. And he tells Zorba, what happened to your finger? He said, I like to play the bouzoukia. And it got in the way, so I cut it off. So if you want to do something, there is a sacrifice. There is a sacrifice. You cannot have any gain unless you are willing to sacrifice. In fact, the measure of love is how much you are willing to sacrifice. Whether it's the love for your children, whether it's the love for your family, whether it's the love for your work. Love cannot be measured without sacrifice. And students don't want to sacrifice anything for knowledge.